I wrote about you in Apocalypse Never. I interviewed you around December of last year, I think, when you were a spokesperson for Extinction Rebellion. And I wrote about Extinction Rebellion in Apocalypse Never. Tell me, what was your reaction when I got in touch with you to interview you? Did you know who I was? Did you figure out who I was? Why did you even talk to me?
I think it's really important to talk to people that you don't agree with on everything, or who have completely different opinions from you. I think it's really important. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? We ruffle each other's feathers. Everybody does that anyway, right? And I'd looked you up, obviously, after you wrote that Forbes article mentioning me, and I liked your TED Talk. I watched your TED Talk. I was like, I really agree with all this. He's done a really good job. That's really, that I'm interested to meet this person and see if there's anything that we have in common. I was involved. I was always doing stuff. This is what I meant when I said I was a bit of a troublemaker. I was always doing stuff, but I was trying to do the right thing. So, university, I helped set up their first green group. Reading University didn't have one before that. It was just me and 2 other people. RBS was investing in tar sands. So we were protesting tar sands investment. And so they were one of the target groups. And as soon as we got in, we took off all our clothes, which, not all our clothes, we had bin bags underneath. And we started pouring molasses onto each other and going, tar sands, delicious. And we're covered because it was all over the floor, and the security guards are just looking at us like, what? And they cleared the bank, and then we sat down and we locked arms and we're like, we're not moving, we keep the bank shut. I was out there camping and getting wet and getting arrested and writing articles and doing all the difficult stuff, just because someone has to. I mean, you were too, right? You did protesting, and both kind of ended up in not in similar places, in the same place.
Well, yeah, except for we've never been in the same place, but yeah.
Never physically been in the same place, but that's just 2020 COVID reality. I used to think the exact same thing, that the water was radioactive and that it killed animals. And what else did I think? I thought the waste killed people. I mean, huge wake-up call for me when I found out that never killed a single person, but I was much younger, not using that as an excuse, but it was before I was questioning things so much. And when you're in the environmental movement, because everybody around you believes it, you just believe it. You don't necessarily think, I'm going to go away and look up whether or not that's true. The people you care about and the people you're campaigning with all believe it. So you just think it must be true. I'm sure we're all guilty of this sometimes, And then a friend of mine sent me a paper about Fukushima after I'd said something. I think I'd said something about how lots of people have been made sick there by radiation, and the paper just proved, it's a scientific paper, it was really good data, just showed that nobody had died there from radiation. And so it just flipped everything. Suddenly I thought, what if everything that I thought about this topic was wrong? What if it's wrong at the end of a dark tunnel of misbelief? and at the end is science. It's great, so it's good. And I was quite excited. I got really geeked out reading all this research and going, wow, this is actually a really good thing, But what I found is the more people I spoke to about it, the more people I upset. Most people, nobody had the same response that I'd had. And I'd either say, you have to believe me, have a look at the papers, and they'd just say, scientists aren't to be trusted, which is, ridiculous, because they trust scientists on everything else, like medicine and taking medication. So I ended up leaving a lot of the groups that I was a part of over that, actually. I was a member of the Green Party, and I left over that. I left over nuclear years ago, and they still have policies that are anti-nuclear. So I attended an event on energy, and there was a panel, and it had 3 experts on it, and 2 were Green Party members, and 1 was a scientist from the Met Office. And do you know what? At that point, I wouldn't say I was pro-nuclear. I was just at that stage where I'd seen a paper and I was questioning. I thought, I'll just put my hand up and ask a question, because nuclear didn't even come up. And I thought, well, that's a bit weird that all it's about is renewables. It just seemed really weird to me. So I put my hand up at the end and said, what about nuclear? Can I just ask the scientist what his opinion is? And the person who was hosting the event didn't pin the mic. He gave it to the candidate, who just said, we don't need nuclear, and then everyone applauded. There's a room of 100 people, everyone applauded, and then I was like, whoa, there's something weird going on here. I just think if you're really sure in your beliefs, it's okay to hear the opposite. It's okay to hear it. You know, you don't have to, what's the danger? You know, you don't have to be afraid of it. And I was just questioning, and then I grabbed him afterwards and I asked him the same question, and he goes, of course we need nuclear. Of course we need it.
And then it came clear to Environmental Progress around the spring or June that Britain was very important, because Britain's considering building new nuclear plants. And so I thought to myself, well, we need some allies in Britain. I think I know like 10 people in Britain total. So 20% of the people I knew were you and Mark Linus, who's another pro-nuclear environmentalist. I knew you were pro-nuclear. So I called you up and I asked you if you would help us. And then basically we had a long video conversation. I think must have been in June, right?
Yeah.
And then finally, I think even before the call ended, I said, can we just hire you to help us temporarily? And you said yes, like on the spot.
You did, but I'd already agreed, hadn't I, to sign letters and do some advocacy. So it kind of made sense, but yeah, it happened very quickly. The first thing I did was the open letter to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, if you remember, because it was immediately finding people that already had been in this fight for a long time, and who were involved but not really committing to it. So it was really good for kind of network building and just going, okay, I'm not completely on my own. My Sizewell protests, which I'm very proud of, my Nuclear for Net Zero, first ever pro-nuclear protests in the UK, and they were so fun. And we went down, the first time we just went into Ipswich Town Centre and gave out a load of bananas. And then the second time we went down to the beach at Sizewell and had a swim in the sea outside Sizewell Beach, and great photos and videos of us splashing around. I even had journalists ask me, you say to me, you're confident to do that, in the water? And people just have this idea right in the back of them, no, I'm fine with it. And then right in the back, they think the water's radioactive. Sorry, there's no story there.
Not radioactive at all.
Maybe if you filled it with bananas. But that created lots of good energy and conversations as well, and it was really fun. And I'm quite excited about this little group that's come together, because you see it happening all around the world, right, with Stand Up for Nuclear. So they ended up both coming out on the same day, which was not intentional on my part, but it obviously made huge splash because of that. And then I had a reporter from the BBC ringing me and saying, why didn't you come to us with that story?
And the BBC then goes and does a story based on the two op-eds that you wrote, both of which were just making the case for building this nuclear plant, building 2 new reactors at Sizewell. The Times of London comes out with a big piece criticizing Extinction Rebellion almost around the exact same time as your op-ed. And you're really a big part of that piece, but the piece is also about other people within Extinction Rebellion and about some problems within Extinction Rebellion. And that was a pretty tough piece for Extinction Rebellion. It's criticizing some financial mismanagement. It's criticizing one of the co-founders of Extinction Rebellion, a guy named Roger Hallam, who had been criticized last year or earlier this year for saying that Germans need to get over the Holocaust, and like you had broken Extinction Rebellion in half. That Extinction Rebellion was kind of lying on the sidewalk bleeding after all of that.
It wasn't worse than after Andrew Neil. After I went on Andrew Neil, I had to turn my phone off.
I beat up on them. And then you kind of beat up on them a bit. And then they finally get their revenge, and they write a piece accusing me, you, and Mark Linus as climate deniers. And I think that was up before I woke up. I must have woke up to it or something, or I'm not sure when it happened. But what was your reaction when you saw that? And there must have been part of you that was like, God, what did I get myself into working with the Shellenberger guy? But tell me what your reaction was.
I never thought that. I knew exactly what I was walking into. I mean, I started working for you before your book came out, so that did change things over here because it made you much more well known. And before that, a lot of people just, you weren't, and that book just blew everything open. So maybe I wasn't prepared for that bit. And especially like people were asking me for the opinion, and it was before the book had even arrived in the post because it hadn't come out here yet, it's a bit ridiculous. But I don't know. I tell you what bothered me. It didn't bother me that they called me a climate denier. Anyone can look at my work, which just predates most of the people in XR, right? I've been in this fight for so long. I've been for 15 years ago, I was shutting down banks for investing in fossil fuels. Like, this, just, I'm not worried about that. What I didn't like was the kind of framing of me as a puppet, just doing your bidding, because anybody who knows me, who works in XR, knows that that's not me. That's just an outright lie. But I'm just going to let it go, because I just think if people are going to believe it, they want to believe it. And if they want to go away and read your book or look at any of my work, then they can make their own minds up. And I'm not going to claim to have any more control than that. It's up to them. And I had a lot of support afterwards from people who'd left XR and some people who are in XR. So it's not done the damage they thought, I don't think.
You know, I don't speak for Michael, and I don't represent Michael, and we're two separate people, and hold me accountable for the things I say, not for the things Michael says. Yeah, you have your own opinions. Well, I think, and then you sort of said that on Twitter, and then somebody said, "Oh, way to throw your boss under the bus." And I said,
win, Mike, just can't win.
Yeah. Well, and I said, Zion and I, we agree on nuclear power, and we agree on the right of poor countries to develop, which is also something that we share. And we may not agree on everything. We don't even necessarily know yet all the things we might disagree on, but that you are your own person, and you're free to say whatever you want. And I'm just honored to work with you, and delighted that we agree on the things that we agree on. And I think for me, it felt very like an important moment, because it was a way of sort of describing the kind of relationships I want to be in, certainly the kind of relationship I want to be in with you, where I don't want to be in a relationship with weak people. I don't want to be, I don't want to have a relationship. I mean, you've never asked me for permission to write an op-ed. I think you've never shown me any of the op-eds that you've published before you wrote them. But the point is that we have a great relationship, and that it doesn't, and then I think it's a more mature relationship. It doesn't mean that just because you're environmental progress doesn't mean that you and I agree on everything, or have to agree on everything, or even need to agree on everything in public. I would never try to, as I said, I never would try to control a force of nature, and that would be ridiculous. Like, why control? You can't control a hurricane. So, but I thought it was a very important moment, and I wondered if maybe that was an important moment for you too.
I've always valued the fact that that's our relationship. So when you first suggested that I come work at EP, it was under a kind of trial, wasn't it? And we both said, if it doesn't work out, then we just walk away and no harm done. And I quite soon in, because you were giving me all this freedom to just go, I was like, he's just going to let me go and do that thing. I'll just do it and see what he says. And then I do something and you'd be like, yeah, good job. I was just very quickly thought, this guy's a really good boss. And we don't always agree on everything, but you're very respectful. Anyone who's followed my work will see that I'm just doing exactly the same thing. The only thing that's changed is it's about nuclear. And that's the bit that really confuses people, right? But all the other stuff is the same, still the same person. And I get a lot more freedom here than I did in Extinction Rebellion. There's so many internal fights where people would try to control work. People would try to control the way things were done. And it's very, very tiresome, very fast, because it prevents you from getting on with doing the thing that you want to do.
Sometimes we might give each other feedback privately. We might say, hey, you might have said that a little differently, or I might have said that a little differently, but I think it's a different kind of relationship than has existed in groups like Greenpeace or Extinction Rebellion or Sierra Club in the past. And I thought that you made an interesting comment privately to me, which was, well, what if you are a climate denier? Who cares? That environmental progress has saved quite a few nuclear power plants. We count about 24 reactors, which is about the equivalent of keeping 24 million cars off the road. And so even if I were a climate denier, which I'm not, my whole book rests on IPCC science, whatever.
I know.
But even if I were, who cares? And I thought that was such an interesting reaction from you.
I made that point to more people since then. So I do like all these interviews and podcasts. I bring it up whenever I can, because I just think we're past that point. I've spent 15 years in this fight, and people have spent 30 years in this fight, and getting people to care about the issues isn't an issue. The issue is right there where the solutions are and where we decide to put our energy. That's it. That's where there's a lot of denial. there's a lot of denial about what the solutions are. That's the bit I'm concerned about, this kind of climate denial thing. Just what difference does it make at this point? We know it's happening, it is happening. Even if there are a few people who are going on about how it's not happening, so what? Makes no difference. Makes no difference, right? The difference is where the energy goes for the solutions, and what solutions are implemented, and whether or not they're actually going to make any difference.
Well, you're being attacked for your association with me. I was, of course, being attacked for going on Tucker Carlson, which is a conservative TV show host here, considered significantly more conservative than Andrew Neil, for example. And it was an interesting, and I've never, I honestly, I've never quite understood the criticism. People say, don't go on Tucker Carlson. And I would be like, why? I mean, I want to be on TV and promote my ideas and of course, promote my book, of course. And I can never quite get a straight answer. Some people would be like, well, you're legitimizing him. And I'm kind of like, he's the biggest TV show in the United States. Like, you think that his success depends on whether or not I go on? There's also sort of an idea that that the association would also involve some sort of endorsement. So if you talk to somebody that you're endorsing the ideas, if you make these bad ideas sort of conscious, everyone goes, oh no. I mean, nobody's saying that, you know. But I think it gets at some issues of identity, of what is it, you know, who are we? And you just are somebody who strikes me as much more comfortable in your identity. I mean, I think this is something that you and I have in common. When people call me a climate denier, I'm just kind of like, I mean, I know I'm not a climate denier. I mean, it's even, or when if people call you a white supremacist, not call you, but call me a white supremacist, I just kind of go, I think the emotional reaction people have to being called those things is some concern that they might actually be that. There's some part of them that is worried, oh my gosh, I might really be a...
I think we're unusual in that we just don't care that much what people think. Mm-hmm. It's more like we have intrinsic goals, like if we're doing the right thing by ourselves, that's the right thing, and that's it. And anyone else can misinterpret that, or they can attack us for it, but we're trying to just do the right thing. And we definitely check in about that all the time, with ourselves, with other people, you know. Kind
of more confident. There's a lot of insecure people, psychologically insecure people who I think, yeah, they're kind of worried, like, am I part of this group? Am I going to be considered part of this group? And oh my gosh, what if somebody says, you know, I'm a racist or a climate denier or a conservative? Oh my gosh, then I might not be part of the group. And we're obviously much more comfortable going in and out of groups, and also some more comfort in our identity.
So I had a similar thing happen when I wrote for the Daily Mail. I had a really big name here, big environmental journalist, email me out of the blue, concerned that I'm working with you, concerned that I'm writing in the Mail. Could he give me advice on this? I had a chat with him on the phone, and I listened to him. You know, I heard him out. I heard what he was saying, and I heard, you know, his concerns. He doesn't like the paper. How would it be received? He'd made mistakes before that made his tribe turn against him. He didn't want that to happen to me. He was just genuinely concerned. And I kind of thought about it, and I went away and I thought about it, and I thought, it is the most read paper in the UK. And he's telling me not to have a platform there because what? Because I need to be liked. See, I don't have that. I don't have that. And also, is that true? If people are really just going to dislike me because I'm engaging with the most popular paper, I don't know what to make of that. That's up to them, right? I can't make decisions for them. But also, I went in there and I talked about climate change. He spent his life talking about climate change in an echo chamber of people that support him and agree with him, right? I went in there and I talked about it in a difficult place where I did get some people say, you know, she's just fallen for this thing and net zero is just control us all. And I thought, you know what? These are difficult conversations, but someone's got to have them. If I'm not in there having them, who's going to do it? It's not an easy thing to do, right? And that's exactly the same with nuclear. Doing that, being an advocate for that is not an easy thing to do, but someone's got to do it. The only thing that changes anything is engaging with subjects, engaging with people, engaging with the difficult conversations. Not saying we're not going to have that conversation, put that over there, we don't have that conversation. The conversation is going to happen with you, without you in it. You do realize that. If you're not in there, it's just happening anyway. So I'm just saying, I'm gonna have a voice, and actually I very slightly resent being told not to have that voice, especially as a brown woman who, look around you in the environmental movement. How many of them do you see in Britain? Most people couldn't name another one. Let's be honest. I put this to people when they said this about the Mail over to me, and they can't name one. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm not going to listen to all of you people with huge platforms who happen to be very successful men telling me not to take a platform that has been offered to me, a huge platform. So I think that's given a lot of people food for thought as well. And it's about time. It's about time, look at that movement and ask yourself why there is a lack of diversity. That's not me stabbing Extinction Rebellion. That is me making a valid criticism from being involved in these groups for a long time. You can't, if you tell us we can't do X, Y, Z thing, and that's the only opportunities that we get, then you're not supporting diverse voices in unusual places. That's okay as well. You don't have to agree with everything. What is this thing where you have to agree with everyone on everything? And when people have said that about you, I'm like, even if we had those like really different polarized views, you agree with your boss on everything. Like, not one person could say yes. Not one person that I've asked.
I'm just gonna ask: were you like this in junior high and high school, or is this a new? Were you kind of? Because I remember in junior high school, people telling you who not to talk to and not to have lunch with particular people, and I remember thinking it was messed up back then. But I wonder if this is something that's come to you later, and is this how your parents raised you, or is this just a pure personality? Where does this come from?
I think it's just a personality. It's always been there. I've always been that person who would just do the things that everyone else thinks is weird. So when I was little, I was trying to get my parents to recycle. They were just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I'd save up the glass jars and I peel off the paper off them and I put them in a little pile. We didn't have curbside recycling then. You had to take it to a bottle bank, which would typically be at the supermarket. So I'd save it up for the Saturday supermarket, and they'd just be like, oh, she's just determined, because the bottles would just, they just stack up, right? Eventually they're like, she's just determined, we're just gonna have to do it. And I just wore them down, and that was pretty much been my life. And I don't even know why, because now they happily recycle everything. Everybody does. I mean, it is easier because there's curbside recycling. So everybody does it. It's normal. So I don't know. I was kind of right. They've said to me that, you were right. We used to laugh at you about this, but you were right. So that's always just been me. I just always just being a bit of an outlier, just not really following things that people consider are rules, like, yes, you don't talk to that group, or you don't engage with that group, or you don't do that thing because it's odd. You don't do that thing, it looks weird. You don't, I've just never really cared. And even and Andrew Neil, I had some really nasty emails after that. I had some it was just so widely viewed. Not everyone saw what you saw, which was that I wasn't defending the figure. Not everyone saw that. They saw it as she got caught out and then she wasn't capable of defending it. But actually I made a choice not to, because I didn't want to. And I felt really uncomfortable, because as a spokesperson, I should have, really, because they continued to back the figure. I had awful things said after that, but I just was kind of like, well, they don't know me. None of them know me. They can say all this stuff, but they're not talking about me. They're talking about an idea that they have from watching a 5-minute clip, and that's it. I don't let it go to, I generally think that most people, when I speak to them, we just get along fine, including those people. If they didn't have this really strong image of who I am and how I'm all of these things, I'd probably get on all right with them, probably have something common with them. And if really they just, the few that just want to be angry and be haters or whatever we call them, then it's not my job to convince anyone, right? They can do it. They might get blocked on Twitter, to be fair, but they can, I don't care. Why would I care? I know it makes me sound unusual. I know from just being alive and having these conversations with people forever. And I know it was weird in school. I know it was weird when I was really little. And my biggest ambition was to be Prime Minister. I know it sounds weird, but that's just me. I wanted to change. Well, then I got older and was like, hang on a minute, the PM doesn't have as much power as I thought. I need to find a different avenue. So just. And so,
like in high school, in like junior high school, were you a cool girl? Were you a nerdy girl? Were you like a theater girl? Who was your crowd? Just curious. I've never asked you before.
You know what? This is, I do get asked this sometimes, and it always surprises people because it's not, it's funny that you've never asked me this because it's going to surprise you. I was a naughty kid.
You were not a kid.
I did not enjoy school. Okay. My parents lived in poverty. My granddad fought in the World War for the British and had PTSD and all kinds of, well, undiagnosed PTSD, all kinds of issues in India. I only met him once when I was really little and I don't remember it. And my parents got out, right? My parents got out separately from the Punjab, came to Britain, got married, had an arranged marriage, very common back then. And they moved, you know, they had no money, they had nothing. They worked. So there is some welfare system here. So they had that because they were given these factory jobs, and Britain was like, we need people in these factories. There were loads of factory jobs at that time. They're all derelict now, they're just empty. But in Birmingham at that time, lots of industry. They were given these jobs in these factories doing really hard, you know, manual work. Like my mum just sitting at a machine all day. I mean, she lost hearing in one ear they did back then, 70s. They didn't really have like health and safety much and the equipment that they needed. And she never complained or anything. She did her job, and they were tired all the time. They were working all the time. They managed to buy a house eventually. They managed to get out of that rut. But we lived in the most inner city part of the city, and they didn't realize, right? They just thought, wow, our kids are gonna be educated. But my school was terrible. My secondary school was terrible. There was so much crime. There was so much gang violence and drug crime. It was really bad. You had to survive that. You had to be a bit of a fighter, which, you know, luckily I had. But especially in the communities as an Indian woman, as an Asian woman, even just stuff like, you know, wanting a career or cutting your hair or not wanting to get married. Those are really were things that you were judged on and that you were attacked for. And I just stood my ground the whole time. And that, you know, in terms of being educated, I hardly learned anything in secondary school. The teachers just didn't care. It's a really awful area with huge behavioural issues. You know, I remember police being on site all the time, coming into school all the time, taking away people's night. It was terrible. I just thought it was normal. When you grow up like that, you just think it's normal. And then school finished, and that school didn't have a sixth form. So usually you go to sixth form for the last couple of years, get your A levels before you go off to university. You need the A levels to get into university. And we didn't have a sixth form because none of the kids wanted to learn. None of them wanted to continue to it. They all just went into whatever, you know, shop, just working as a cashier or whatever. They didn't have those ambitions. So I went to because I'd realised by then I was a bit older and I was like, this school is really bad. I'm going to find somewhere good. I applied to go to a really good school on the other side of Birmingham, and I got in, and then completely changed my world about being around people who wanted to learn and who were, you know, really quite well off and who were smart. And I had teachers that encouraged me, who were like, this person's smart, we're going to encourage her. And I did really well at my A levels, and then, you know, applied to go to university. So I didn't have a typical school experience. And especially when I talk to people, most people I talk to, they've been through, you know, private education, really good experiences. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't have any of that. I just really didn't have any of those contacts. Also, I mean, I had to learn. I had to go back and relearn basic history and stuff because I hadn't learned it at school. I mean, I passed everything because I was smart enough to cruise along just from looking at textbooks, but I didn't, you know, I wasn't really engaged with learning or anything. School was about surviving, and I survived because I get along with people. But I was always, you know, always odd in those communities, always odd, including going on to further education, which I know people would probably be surprised, but and that's changed now. That's changed for people that live here for third generation, but second generation, as they would say I am, which is daughter of migrants. It was not until because our parents just they didn't worry about education. They wanted us to have some education, but they really wanted us to have jobs. That's what matters to them, right? They come from a country where there's no opportunity. The biggest thing is just get out of school as soon as you can and get really good jobs. You don't need to carry on. You know, why would you need to carry on? They get it now because they can see that pretty much most of their kids did it, but at the time they didn't. It was just, it's just something you had to get through because legally you have to go through the education system. And yeah,
but you
it's
said
really,
you sound like a good girl to me, but you said you were a mischievous girl, or
I had to be. No, I had to defend myself. I had to defend myself from people who thought that women had a certain place. This deprived area was, there were a lot of groups from cultures where they thought that's what they believed of women. And I would say probably 80% of the kids in that school wore headscarves. Those my friends, the people I grew up with. It's, great. It's great. That's what they want to do in life. But I was there with my short hair. I was there like just standing out all the time, standing out, being a character, and that I had to defend myself. I had a nickname in school which was Boy, which is a really weak nickname, right? But it was an insult. Oh, it's Boy. She likes to have short hair instead of like long luscious hair like Indian women are supposed to have. She wants to have a job. She doesn't want to get married. What's wrong with her? Why didn't she want to get married? That was pretty much my childhood. Not at home, not from my family, in school. Yeah.
So these were Indian kids, Pakistani kids, Bangladeshis, or they're Africans?
They were mostly Pakistani. It's probably like 90% Muslims in that. It's not a Muslim school, it's an ordinary school, but in a very deprived area of Birmingham. To be honest, I don't think it's any better now. Everybody that I know has moved out of that area because it's just so, you don't want to live there once you can afford to move out. It's just because it's where the cheapest house they first put people when they came over. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been back there. I'd hope that I'd hope that the school's better and it's changed and so on, but I can only speak of my experiences.
So, well, that's a really amazing experience, and I do hope you become prime minister.
But it makes me laugh, like when people say, "Oh, these people," especially I had this in Extinction Rebellion. They're so middle class. Look at her talking on TV. Look, she's so middle class. I'm like, are you joking? Are you joking, man? You have no idea what my life was like, which was childhood was a struggle. First of all, you're a daughter of migrants, right? In a country that isn't that welcoming to them, even then, and you're straddling two cultures, right? Your parents want you to have all this culture, and at home you go and eat patties and dal, and you watch ZTV. That's what they watch, the Indian channel, and you listen to BBC Asian Network. In fact, that was later. I don't even know if that existed then. But you've got all that stuff, and yeah, you are going to get married. No one says it, but it's what's expected. You're going to get married. You're going to have lots of babies. You're going to live down the road. And then there was me, who was like, wow, I really like literature and I love music and I want to have a career and I want to be prime minister. And I probably don't want to live here, which I don't, right? I live here in Devon. That's always a sore point because all my family's back up in the Midlands. People tend to stay, where they're from in their networks. And I moved quite far away.
No, but the stereotype is that South Asian parents are strict with the boys and spoil the girls. Was that the case with your family?
That is the stereotype. Sorry, my light's being weird. That is the stereotype, but I would say in my family it wasn't as gender based as much, really. Mm-hmm. But everybody was just expected that you've got to go and get a job and work. You've got to survive on your own. You've got to be on your own 2 feet. It was more that, and I think that was just kind of unique to my parents, to be honest. It was always understood we're all going to get married and have babies. That's just what you do. And they don't believe that now. They relaxed about it over the years, but they came from a culture where that's normal. I mean, my mum was one of 11, right? And then my parents had 6 kids. The idea of not having babies, they're like, well, why wouldn't you do that? That's what you're supposed to do. What is she talking about? She wants a career. What? But once I'd done those things, and like when I had my book and stuff, then they completely understood it and were really excited about it, especially when my book came out. They're really excited about it because they could see it and understand what it was. Whereas before, all they were seeing was someone who wasn't going to go into a not even 9 to 5, like 9 to 8 job, like they were doing just all hours, because they wanted us to have that security. Because when you live in poverty, when you come from poverty, I feel like you always carry that, like at least with not just with my family, my parents, but extended family, a generation, they just always carry it. their backs are hunched from it, and it's always going to be there, even though now they've paid off their house and their kids are all successful and they've got no reason to worry. They've got pensions because they work their whole lives. They should be fine. Even now, they worry about that security. Do we have enough? Are we okay? And I just don't have that worry, right? I went straight into university, took out a big loan. That's what we do. That's what you do if you're British. And at some point, you're going to pay it back, and it's a huge loan, and everybody does it in order to go to university. Nobody doesn't do it. Fees are really expensive. And I just, I didn't have that worry, and that's where that difference is, and that working out how to straddle those two cultures is actually really a complicated thing for everyone in that generation. I had a really good conversation about this with someone recently, a guy called Bobby Jagdev. He has a podcast, and he read my Mail article, and he said one thing that stood out in that article was that I talked about the Punjab, and he was like, my family's from, so we had all these really similar experiences, and a lot of what we talked about was just growing up in this really weird place where you don't really have an identity, but you always have two. But you've got to work out how much you want to take of each and how much, where you're really at. And I remember one thing my parents always saying, when you go to India, you'll love it, it'll feel like home. And then I went to India and I was like, whoa, I'm really British, I don't fit in here. I like clean water. I don't like snakes, giant snakes. I don't like the wild dogs that have rabies. All of that stuff, I was just like, whoa, what do you mean? This is not my country. It's not my country, And that's a hard thing for that generation to understand. But to be honest, even my parents felt it. They could move back there and be amongst all their family, and they had this dream that they do it when they're retired, and they didn't do it because they want clean water and they want electricity and they want access to medication. They want all the creature comforts, fine, that's good. But, in a way, for them, it's sad because they're split. They're always going to be that they're always going to miss something here or there. Whereas I'm just, I'm ultimately just from here, and I had to work out exactly, maybe that helped in some ways because I was young and I had to kind of work out who I was early on. I had to just go, how much of this, everybody's telling me something different. Where am I actually at? Am I a boy for wanting to have short hair? I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it's a cultural thing. And in Asian culture, women don't really have short hair. It's very unusual. Very, very unusual. If you look at Bollywood actresses, it's only if you're like the evil character. So different to, beauty standards in Hollywood. They have different standards than here. And for some reason, I decided to be that kid that would always cut her own hair and have short hair. I was just really determined to just be like, that stereotype sucks. I'm going to do it. I want to do it. And then I had to stand up for myself because of that, because it was not well received in those communities. But yeah.
But clearly your parents you must have had very loving and supportive parents in order to have
a strong enough.
I mean, yeah, of course, they worked a lot though. I didn't see them a lot, to be honest, but that's because they wanted to provide for us, and they did, and they have done.
So you were partly raised by were you partly raised by your older siblings then?
Yeah, well, my older sister is 10 years older, so unfortunately for her, it did fall to her to look after the younger ones because she was already a teenager and we were really little. I have more memories of her doing stuff with us. My parents just worked all the time. They just worked night shifts and overtime, and they were exhausted all the time. Yeah, they had hard lives even once they came over, but I don't know, were they always supportive? They didn't want me, I don't know, they didn't want me to go to university. Like I said, they didn't understand it. They do now, and I've paved the way for lots of other people in that extended family, younger people, to go. But for me to want to go when none of my older siblings had, including my brothers, this is what I mean, it's not really a gender thing. My brother didn't go. It was just, again, me being odd, saying I wanted to do something that they didn't understand. And I just insisted.
But tell me how you were about it.
I was challenging. Make of that what you will. Some people will take that as being mischievous.
You would talk back to the teachers.
Bucking the trend. So let me give you an example, okay? I live in this really conservative, traditional area, right? It's inner city Birmingham. Like most people are migrants. Most people are first generation. They're all working in factories. They're all exhausted. They all want their kids to behave and get good educations and get good jobs. And then I come along and I'm like already being a little bit difficult because I'm like, well, I'm gonna save these bottles up. And my mum's like, no, they're in the way. We live in this tiny little house, got loads of kids. The toilet's like, it was a little, the toilet was in the garden, I hated that toilet because it's full of spiders. huge spiders, and you had to use it in the night, and you put light on, and all the spiders would be, anyway. And she's like, you're not piling up glass bottles. And I would just keep doing it. And now I'm like, man, I better stress my mum so much, because I have kids now, right? And I know what it's like when they won't clear the Lego away and I step on it, and they won't clear it away and I step on it. And I was just piling them up, and then they just gave in. One day they just gave in and said, let her take the bottles. We'll just take the bottles, it's easier. And then I was at this school, and they just, again, this first generation, they want you to keep your head down. A lot of them don't get, so people often ask me, why don't they get involved in climate action or, environmental, because they want to keep their heads down, right? They just get on with it. They don't want to cause a fuss. And here I am causing a fuss. So I went to school and I wanted to have short hair, and my parents said, no, Asian girls don't have short hair. And I got a pair of scissors and I cut it myself, and it looked terrible. And my dad said, don't do that again, it looks terrible. And I went to school and I got called boy, and I didn't care. And then it grew, and then I did it again, until he just gave me some money and said, go to a hairdresser. I wore him down. And even now I think, God, why did I do it? These people are so stressed already. But I just had to, because I wanted to do it. And I felt that no one has a right to tell me otherwise. That was just it. And I was just, like with the bottle thing, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing a good thing. And it wasn't really, too much to ask of them, because we went to the supermarket anyway, and the bottle bank was right there. It wasn't like a huge ask. But I get that it was more work for, I know what it's like to be a parent now.
Yeah, of course.
Well, right? But when people are like, they say, oh, she sounds really well off and she comes from privilege, I'm like, screw you, man. Screw you. I worked fucking hard. I had nothing. I had none of the education. I worked so hard. I went to university. I stayed at university every summer. All my friends would go home to their parents, and I would stay in Reading and work on my own in these student houses. I had kids in my school that went to prison, like juvenile prison, for rape. I wasn't having it. I just stood up for myself. I got in physical fights with people sometimes. It was so horrible to me. Boys stood my ground, always stood my ground, and I always will. This stuff is nothing to me. That press release is nothing. Yeah, it pisses me off that they did it. It was wrong, because it was wrong. But in the scheme of my life, it's just nothing, Look at this. Safe, healthy. My kids go to a great, so I moved down here. I moved down here because the schools are really good. This is a tiny city. There's virtually no crime.
I'm so happy for you, and I love your story, and now I understand. So part of the reason that I was excited and delighted to make your position permanent and for you to come on as a campaigner is that we were gonna also now expand the campaign to Europe. You've had a bunch of interactions, and it's been just delightful to see you having interactions with pro-nuclear campaigners, basically your counterparts in France, in Netherlands, and I'm just really, I think you're going to bring a lot to, I think we're all going to help each other, but you're going to bring a lot to your kind of campaigning. Your assertiveness is going to make a huge impact, and I'm curious, what's been your reaction with dealing with, because you've suddenly now you're part of a movement. There's people that there's colleagues of yours.
It's amazing. It's so brilliant, and everybody I speak to they're just so great. We have so much to talk about, because and for me, to be honest, the first time that I found any kind of tribe where I'm like, these people, I get it, and they are actually listening to the experts, and they are actually doing this because they care about the issues that we all care about, but they're putting their energy into something good and into a good solution, and they tend to be a little bit geeky, which is my thing as well. I like that. Getting to know those people, and I spoke at Stand Up for Paris as well a few weeks ago, which is really, it was really bizarre actually, because I've not done, obviously because of COVID, it was just over Zoom, and that was weird, but I could see a whole crowd of people with banners. It was really exciting. I was glad that I could be there and just be in the crowd, greeting people who are just, standing out in the rain with their placards, egging me on and getting really involved, talking about the issues. It's really exciting, and it couldn't happen at a better time. I'm really, really glad to be involved and to be making these connections, and to take it to a Europe-wide campaign is important.
I think you've really inspired a lot of people, Zion, honestly. I mean, I know that you've inspired people, and I think we've seen people stepping up in new ways. I think people are getting more outside their comfort zone.
What you were saying earlier about people being inspired to take action. That, I mean, that's been a lot of my background. A lot of my work has been that kind of creative. I'm really happy when someone rings me and says, and this happens all the time, like, I'm going to do a banner drop. How big does a banner need to be? And I'm like, because they're starting right at the beginning. It's quite exciting for me. I mean, I've done this stuff for years, and I'm like, okay, wow, how big's your bridge? You know, have you thought about getting the little tabs on the side so you can tie it up with rope, and having those really basic conversations? But it's exciting for me because, you know, I didn't know that stuff 15 years ago, but now it's really useful knowledge. And so, you know, Astrid will send me something and say, do you think this is a good idea? Should I do this? And I'll say, you never know what will take off, you know, give it a try and see. People might be really enthusiastic and send lots of cat pictures in. And they did actually, you know, a fair few people did. I didn't follow it closely, but I saw that some did. I sent mine in. Yeah, so I am involved, but it's kind of, they're rolling it, and I'm there if they need help, which is great because we need lots of different groups, different people doing different things, bringing their energy in, and I'm always, you know, I'm always around to give people advice on anything really, especially, you know, I've been an activist for a long time, so I've done a lot of different stuff, some of it quite weird, some of it quite creative, so it's given me a really unusual skill set in some way, especially for this community, because it hasn't been in nuclear before. It tends to be more kind of like technical stuff and like STEM side and like writing report, all that stuff is really good. This kind of like, let's take a banana on the beach and go for a swim and give out bananas and, you know, wear pink shorts and all that stuff has been missing a little bit, and have giant inflatable bananas, you know, give the press something fun to write about, and all of that has been missing. So I'm quite excited to bring a little bit of that in. Yeah. Anyway, yes, good to talk to you. Have a good weekend.